What's going on? My name is Pseychie, and fresh out of the oven, today I wanted to show off one of the coolest looking items that I found in the Castlevania DLC. We'll be taking a look at the Death's Scythe. Now, I actually haven't unlocked all of the weapons from the new expansion so far, but I just loved the look and feel of this weapon, so I just wanted to get this showcase out. Death's Scythe is a survival-only weapon that, when landing the final blow on an enemy, will turn them into a ghost, and when you're nearby another target, they will fly themselves into that target, dealing damage, with the amount of damage proportionate to how much health the monster had. I personally cannot get enough of the animation. As you can see, it follows a 4-hit combo, and the animation looks really nice. And then, in a second here, I'm gonna get something really incredible. That's right, the legendary variant of the Death's Scythe. And as the legendary variant, it has the unique affix of enemies killed by ghosts become ghosts themselves. So it's kind of akin to the legendary Tombstone, in the sense that it has a snowball effect, where if you kill a target with it, the target itself will just seek out another target and then the chain just continues. You'll see some really cool footage of the ghosts just exploding on contact here. But from what I've seen, it's definitely a more gimmicky weapon. I'm really not sure what kind of synergies it adds to the table, but I really like the feel and look of the weapon. So in this run specifically, you might be wondering why I'm not going to the castle outskirts, aka the new DLC areas, and that is because if I go there, I will not be able to access the late game biomes in the same run. As I've stated in the overview video, if you go to the early game biomes of Castle Outskirts and then Dracula's Castle, you can't fight Dracula as the final boss anymore. So in this video, in order to show off what an awesome boss fight Dracula is, as well as a new ending to the game, I'm going to hold off on the new DLC areas. Maybe we'll do that next time in the next showcase. But for this run specifically, I just plan on showcasing a Death's Scythe and then accessing Dracula in the late game. But if you're just interested in seeing the new content, there's a timestamp where I go to Dracula's castle in the description. Now, a couple of first observations I have with the Death's Scythe. If it works, it is absolutely brilliant. When a ghost explodes, it actually deals critical hit damage. As far as I know, it doesn't actually do any crits if you're just hitting it with the scythe. So, if there are actually a lot of enemies around, it benefits the Death's Scythe a lot more versus if you're just in a single room with a single enemy. Alright, so Corrupted Prison is the part of the run where things start to get a little bit dicey. I did not get a single dual color scroll that had survival, so I'm going to be going into this biome with a lower than average scroll count than I would have liked. But this biome will start to illustrate that not all biomes favor the Death's Scythe. This biome specifically features a lot of large and single target enemies like those sludges. During times like this, you just have to hack away at them, and you're not going to be able to do crits. And this is probably the time of the run where it starts to look like the Death's Scythe is not actually good in all of the situations, even though you guys may have been impressed by the starting footage in the intro. So by itself, considering that you can't do any crits with it, the damage is just okay. I do have to commend it for being a fairly fast survival weapon. At this point, you'll probably be thinking that it will run into trouble during some boss fights, as you just have to rely on it being a beat stick. It's just like how Tombstone works. You can't really rely on it to deal any crits in long drawn out situations on solo fights. But then again, a lot of weapons in this game are just beat sticks if the crit conditions are not met. If it ever comes to that, all you really need is a high enough scroll count. Now, I haven't seen all of the weapons in the DLC yet. I've only seen a small portion of them. The DLC's just come out, and I don't know the unlock conditions for a lot of the new items. I saw one that's called the Cross, where it's essentially like a boomerang, but it will fling itself forward and then remain in the air for a couple seconds before it flies back to you. So the movement really mimics the boomerang. The only thing is that if you manage to get an enemy right on the tip of the cross's range, it will do critical hits. So I will definitely describe that as a high skill ceiling item. There's also a whip in the game called the Vampire Killer. I believe the last time I checked its description, it does critical hits against targets that are burning. This is actually really rare. I don't think I see a lot of burning synergy weapons in the game. Not that there's a lot of items in the game that gives the burning status anyways, if you really think about it. But I believe that's the next weapon that's on my lineup to showcase. There's also a new shield in the game, Alucard's shield. I am not sure how to use it effectively, but just knowing that we have a brand new shield in the game really makes things exciting. I don't believe there has ever been a new shield in the game ever since Rise of the Giant, where we got the Thunder Shield. So there's a lot more weapons that's just on the tip of my tongue. I can't exactly think of them here, but there's a total of, I believe, 12 different new items that are being added into the game. So it's definitely going to add a lot of flavors into your runs. Now at this point in the Ancient Sewers, right before I drank the health flask, I actually did not take any damage before that moment, so I think it really goes to show just how powerful the scythes are. And a topic I've wondered about for a long time is that if you really think about it, Dead Cells is actually a live service game. It's constantly being updated with new additions. There's paid content once in a while, and that's really just to support the development of the studio's next game. And I honestly prefer this approach of development a lot better than just having microtransactions. Something else that came out very recently, just prior to the Castlevania DLC, is that Deep Rock Galactic had a new supporter upgrade. And it really goes to show that if you respect your player base, then they will return the favor. A lot of them are saying how buying the supporter upgrades will support the development of the game very well, and some of them actually encourage you to buy the upgrades at full price as opposed to on a discount. Alright, we're entering the Conjunctivius fight, and then I also picked up a brand new pet that was introduced into the game, Maria's Cat, I believe it's called. So this pet has some different properties. First of all, it is a brutality and survival split. This is actually the first pet in the game that scales with 2 different colors. So when you pick up the cat, you can activate it, and then it will kind of just follow you around and then slowly chip away at enemies. If you press the skill button, it will jump onto your shoulders, and when it is within melee range, it will also scratch away at the enemy. However, if you press the skill button again while it's on your shoulders, it's going to turn into this giant beast that deals a lot of damage in the area just in front of you. And after that, it will go back to the mode where it just goes off on its own. So there's a lot of modes to this pet, and I really have to commend them for the amount of creativity. I think having 3 modes to a different skill really shakes things up. Now, I do believe that the best time, at least the best mode to be using Maria's Cat, is to just have it sit on your shoulders, because you will always be able to get value out of it. Something I don't like with the leg hugger from the Queen and the Sea is that it lags behind your movements way too much, and by the time you're done with every encounter, it only then catches up to where you are now. So that's something that I think that Maria's Cat will have to deal with as well if you're just letting it wander around. But that won't be a problem if you let it sit on your shoulders. Now, I believe that if it doesn't scratch anything, if it's on your shoulders for a brief moment of time, it will just go back to wandering around. So some really interesting flavors there. And then this fight, I'm really just using Wolf Trap to cheese the fight, essentially. Wolf Trap just makes fights a lot easier. Yes, you do have to rely on the Death Scythe being a beat stick, but the Wolf Trap just does such a good job of amplifying your damage that it just doesn't matter. So I'm gonna go to the graveyard, because at this point of the game, you actually have to consider a little bit about your biome choices when playing the Scythe. You definitely don't want to go to biomes where there's a lot of big single target enemies, like the Slumbering Sanctuary. In the graveyard, however, because there's a lot of rats, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for you to get ghosts to become your allies, and that's essentially really valuable. So again, this is an aspect of complexity that I don't think a lot of other roguelikes have, is that your biome choices actually kind of matter when determining the success of your run. And it is a conscious decision that players will have to make each run that could have long-lasting consequences. So approaching the mid-game portion of the run, this is the part of the run where you'll really get to see just the amount of potential each one of your weapons have. At this point, you're not really restricted by the low amount of scroll counts. You can really start to experiment and see just how crazy the scaling gets for a lot of weapons when they reach this point of the run. A lot of weapons struggle a lot in the early game, but once you have the appropriate amount of scrolls down, they can still be a powerhouse. And while you may have noticed that the weapon struggles a little bit during Corrupted Prison, you can see that with 16 stats in survival, it really starts to pick up on the damage. So when evaluating weapons, at least for me personally, I also like to imagine like how much creativity you can have with this weapon. And at this point of the run, I can probably put this in A or S tier, just mainly because it's just a really powerful weapon. You can have a lot of fun with it, but I wouldn't say it has a lot of creativity to it. Unless I'm missing something where you can do something with the ghosts, I really don't think there is a lot of diversity to this kind of playstyle. One thing I actually haven't tested is whether or not it works with the swarm grenade. Imagine that if you kill your own swarm maggots, it actually becomes ghosts. That would honestly be pretty cool. So in this run, I'm going to the Forgotten Sepulcher, because I want to be able to access Timekeeper. Now, the first time you access Dracula's castle in the late game, Alucard will tell you to go to Timekeeper because there's a dialogue there where he states the structure of the clock room has a similar structure to his world, so that becomes your point of entry for Dracula's castle. I'm not sure if there's another way to access the same biome. I imagine the DLC will give you a lot of freedom as to which biomes you can access Dracula's castle from, so I imagine you'll be able to do it if you fight the giant or any of the other second bosses in the game. But just to keep things safe, where I know for sure I will be able to access Dracula, I'm just gonna go try to fight Timekeeper. And then if you're not sure about routing the game, there's actually a handy little tool in the pause menu now, where it will tell you which biomes you've been to and how each biome connects to one another. Though the one thing is that you do have to actually have gone to the biomes once in order to reveal it in the tool. So in this biome, the Berserker mutation is doing some serious work here. I honestly think it's one of Survival's greatest mutations to have, and honestly a staple when you're playing a lot of these slow melee weapons. So the amount of damage reduction it gives is pretty insane. So as you can see on 5 boss cells, if you get hit right after killing an enemy with a melee strike, the damage reduction is absolutely huge. It really embodies the survivability of green or survival as a color. So this biome is gonna be the last biome before we get to Dracula's castle, because in this run, it was actually my first time going to the new endgame DLC areas on 5 BC. Off camera, I did practice a lot of the boss fights. Unfortunately, there is no training room for Dracula as well as Death so far, but I'm pretty sure they're gonna add it in later. So I practiced a little bit of the boss fights, but I don't know like absolutely everything about their movesets and stuff. And I actually wonder if there's new interactions if you face them on 5 BC or along the lines of something like that. So we're gonna fight Timekeeper now. And Timekeeper is a squishy boss. With Wolf's Trap, I don't expect to have any trouble with this boss at all. Even though you can't summon ghosts to fight for you, as you can see, just with the cleaving power of Death's Scythe, as well as the damage amplification of Wolf Trap, it just does so much damage. Yeah, in a moment here, Timekeeper is gonna get into a weird death animation, and then it is a flawless boss fight. So, finally, we're moving on to Dracula's castle. This is the new DLC area that's added in the late game. There's even a unique entry card where it presents you the name of the biome's name, which I believe is obviously a reference to Castlevania. Unfortunately, I have stated this before, but I have not played Castlevania, so I feel like a lot of the references will just go over my head. So in this biome, we have a lot of really unique new enemies that's never seen before in the game. So we have the skeletons that chuck bones at you. Those things really hurt actually, and if you come to Dracula's castle as a mid-game biome, it actually puts out a large chunk of your health. And then in a second here, I'm going to enter the lore room where you rescue Richter the first time you come here. However, this was when I actually found out that this is how you access the hidden level where you play as Richter. So you'll see me kind of just figuring out all the weapons here, figuring out the movesets, what is it that Richter does that's different to the Beheaded, and then something really unique is that I tried jumping, and the double jump is one where you don't actually jump again, but you kind of fling yourself backwards, which is really hard to describe on the camera. But if you come to this level yourself and you play with Richter for a bit, you'll see just how much of a far cry Richter controls as opposed to the Beheaded. So same thing goes for those ledges, you can't actually climb onto them, and the double jump doesn't reach that far up. When you collect these hearts from the blue chandeliers, which is actually something I didn't know early into this level, you can access your skill of Holy Water, which I believe is an actual skill in the game that you can unlock. So that's also a cool detail. And then something else is that those skeletons, at least those bone serpents where it shoots out fireballs at you, I don't believe I've actually seen them in the regular Dracula's castle area. Unless I'm missing something, those enemies are actually exclusive to the Richter level. So I'm gonna stumble my way around and I'm gonna find some upgrades here and there. And then this upgrade will allow you to high jump. It's a little bit weird how it works. You can't just double jump as you would in Dead Cells, but you kind of have to tilt your left stick up when you're double jumping, and then that will allow you to perform a unique jump where you can reach a higher distance than you would previously. So this point of the run is where I figured out, okay, so you want me to hit those chandelier things because those actually give you stuff. I didn't know that at first. That's probably the reason why I had such a low heart count. And then you also have this secret level that's just off on the side. It's like a rampart overseeing the castle, and then you actually unlock a hidden blueprint here. I'm going to just keep going through the level. I don't want to spoil everything, because I think it is something that you should see for yourself. And then you kind of fight this Medusa-like boss here at the end. It kind of reminds me of Scarecrow, the way she just kind of runs up at you. But even on 5 BC, I'm pretty sure the damage is not scaled here. You just kind of defeat it and then you're done. When you go back to the Beheaded, you will unlock the Richter outfit as well as Alucard's sword. And then in a moment here, you'll see Dracula kind of interrupting you every now and then where he tries to stop you. And he'll do this in a lot of different ways. So he might launch a wall of fireballs at you, but it's pretty easy to dodge. You can just roll through it and then he would just disappear. Some of his interruptions are a lot more disruptive, and then one of them is him spawning a lot of bats. Again, nothing you can't deal with, and especially with Death's Scythe, those are pretty much made into a joke. At one point, he'll actually turn an enemy into an elite. I think this is definitely one of the more disruptive effects, but if you're this late into the game, you really shouldn't have any problems with damage scaling. Everything should just die in like 1 or 2 hits anyways. So the level structure of the castle is also a little bit unique. You start off in like the bottom section of the castle, and then to make it to Master's Keep, which is essentially the final chamber, you have to go to the top of the castle in like the ramparts area. And then what's something really unique is that it also has a guaranteed curse chest. This curse chest, last time I checked, is also here if you go to the castle as the early game biome. And then having a guaranteed curse chest this late into the game is definitely really risky. So take that what you will, but one thing I also noticed is that you get a lot more scrolls in Dracula's castle. And then this is probably one of the more disruptive effects, is that Dracula will turn your screen upside down for a brief moment. Like, this can seriously mess you up if you're not prepared for it. So just like Richter, you also have to fight the Medusa-like mini-boss in order to gain access to the Master's Keep. So when you defeat Medusa, you'll be able to get to this chest, and it should have a unique key in there where it's called the Petrified Key. So with this key, you'll be able to unlock the door that leads to the final biome. So this key is actually unique to the late game version of Dracula's castle. When I came here for the first time, the key was not here. You didn't have to unlock any doors, but you also could not fight Dracula, obviously. So we're gonna enter the final stage, as it says on the title card, Master's Keep, and then you kind of walk down this long corridor where you go to Dracula. And then something really unique here is that this opening cutscene is dependent on the skin that your character wears. So I'm wearing a new skin that came from the DLC where it's like an armor skin, and then Dracula will kind of react to your outfit, which is really cool. There's a Maria outfit in the game, in which case he will say something different, and then the boss fight will start as usual. So he has a lot of different moves up his sleeve. So this fight is not going to showcase all of his attacks, but some of them that I thought were really unique is that he'll fling like fireballs at you, and those cannot be dodged. Like, you actually have to physically jump over them. And then you might be thinking, wow, that was an easy fight. Surely that can't be it, right? Maybe it's just because the Death Scythe is too overpowered. But then again, why is it giving us gold and then a bunch of weapons? And then you'll see rumblings and you'll be transported into a strange place. Yeah, so my first reaction was, that surely could not be over. And don't worry, Dracula actually has one more trump card up his sleeve. So this is the second phase of the Dracula fight. And this fight is really something else. He kind of floats into the air in his demon form, and then he has like these moves where he flings the rocks at you, and then that was the meteor attack I was talking about. Those fireballs cannot be dodged. Like, you actually just can't roll through them. You have to physically dodge them. And in a second here, he's gonna do one of the most unique boss moves I've seen in the game, where he launches like this giant meteor down the middle. And then what you have to do is to climb up these platforms. You'll see it in a bit. And then you have to go to the middle, and then once that happens, everything just kind of crumbles around you, and then Dracula will come down and face you again. So this is definitely one of the more interesting moves that I've seen. I'm sure this is all just a tribute to the real Castlevania boss fight. I'm not sure how the original fight goes, but I'm sure it's something similar to this. So he's got like different moves where he grabs you and then slams you down. There's definitely a lot of interesting ways that this fight that's not present in a lot of other Dead Cells bosses. So he has like a sweeping laser attack, and then you kind of have to watch your footings as well. So I'm definitely a little rusty in this fight because this is only like the third time I've faced Dracula. This is definitely one of the more lengthier boss fights, and it definitely warrants the extra amount of scrolls that you get in the Dracula's castle. But finally, we're gonna finish him off. So this is the end of the first showcase of Return to Castlevania. And then later on, it shows a unique cutscene where Dracula's castle crumbles, and then your character just kind of watches from the distance. So enjoy the new ending. Hopefully you've enjoyed this brand new showcase of the DLC weapon, and I will see you all next time.